Just when America has reached a breaking point with division, visionary influencer Danni Benson's I'm Proud of You Sis bro movement taps into the pulse and heartbeat of a culture radically torn. But this loving mom's voice of reason and calm has received national recognition.
How'd you balance having your children and always traveling with the Yankee organization?
When I became a dad, I said that I would always love like a mother.
I feel like I have to try certain things or act a different way because I know some people or some kids.
So join Danni Benson as she celebrates her special guests on her show and highlights their gifts and contributions to our world.
Hi, everyone. Hi, my name is Danni Benson. Thank you for joining. I'm proud of you, sis. I hope you're having a wonderful day today. I am so excited that this guest is coming on because we were on a conversation on the phone just talking about the state of education and why it is. And we were both expressing our opinions. And it is so important right now for us to make sure that our kids are working even harder in school because AI is coming and is going to eliminate so many jobs, especially low-level jobs that a robot can do, that we have to make sure that our kids are doing excellent in school now because they're going to be competing for jobs that everyone might be competing for because the low-level jobs might not exist. So it's important that you learn a skill. It's important you teach your kids some tangible skills as early as possible. Find out what they like, what they enjoy, their passion, and try to cultivate it, because in cultivating the earliest possible time of cultivating their passion, it will help them in the future in what they want to do, especially when the robots are coming. I don't want to scare anyone, but they are coming. They're already here. And slowly but surely, they're going to be taking jobs away. And we, as a society, need to get our children ready for what's to come. So I have Kemi Omoyosi here. Hi, Kemi.
Hi.
And she was here before, and we wanted to just have this show just to talk about education because we want people to understand that education is a very important thing. Education is the foundation of everybody in this country. The more educated you are, the more knowledge you have, I feel personally, the higher you go in life. So Kemi made a good point last week when I was talking to her about the investment of someone who has a home is invested versus, not to say people who live in apartment buildings are not invested, but she sparked an interest in me. So I wanted her to give me her interpretation of that so we can get into why education is so important.
Oh, okay. Well, so basically what I had said is that when you don't own property, there's no, the taxes don't go into the school system. And I say this because I grew up in the school district I grew up in was a very wealthy school district. And so we were considered maybe we just called it like a public-private school, but the taxes went into the school districts, which means kids were able to take trips. We were able to buy books. There was just so much money in the district, which went towards the school. And so that means the parents were more invested in the school district. And I say this because I also worked in New York City public schools. And from my experience with working within the New York City public school system, one of the things I realized is that because a lot of in New York, a lot of people are apartment dwellers. And so also research shows that I think it's 85% of kids in New York City 85, I think it's Black and brown, and then 70% is low income in New York City. And so you also have to keep in mind, so with everybody living in apartments, like there is no money that goes into the schools. And also you have to keep in mind with the different mayors, certain mayors have agendas where some of them are like, oh, it's okay to invest in schools, or we're going to put money back to the schools, and others want to get rid of certain programs to make the playing field equal.
And
Right.
you know what's crazy is Mayor Adams just took away $1 billion in New York City education, and I'm just so surprised because COVID just happened. These kids are behind. Like, there's national studies that shows that kids, especially in New York and the places that closed down for COVID, those kids are behind. So I would have thought that you would put in more education to make sure you catch these kids up, because they're going to be known as the generation of
The lost
like
generation.
the lost generation of educated children, because now they've lost like about 2 years. Like, kids can, I personally feel that the younger the kid is, the
It's
harder
easier.
it is for them to do remote.
True, but I also feel like the younger they are, it's easier for them to catch up versus being older, like high school kids, where I would even say like from 5th grade on, because also keep in mind during the COVID time period, they didn't do testing to, to test kids to get into the talented and gifted schools. And so that they took that off the table. And so then it's also like now I think after 2 years, they're restarting it again. And I think what mayor was trying to get rid of it, I think de Blasio, but
De Blasio was trying to get rid of it.
Yeah.
and then Eric Adams, which I think he increased it or something, or said we're going to keep it.
I mean, how do you feel about that? Do you feel that they're trying to say the gifted schools is a disadvantage to, Black and brown, because there's more of, higher income kids, or kids that have, are able to get the education to, meaning tutoring, and, the parents are working, they can invest more than what the community gives into the school? I mean, how do you feel about that?
Having actually worked at a talented and gifted program where I was like one of the admissions advisors, I saw it from the pre-K level, and then I saw it from the high school level. So with the pre-K kids, I noticed that a lot of kids, I noticed that the brown kids, there was less of us there, and the ones that were accepted, the things that kept them from actually, they would get high scores on the Stanford Binet exam test, which was a test that they would do with the psychologist. And then what would keep them from actually getting into the school was how they would react in group environments. And so as minorities, we're known to speak harshly to our kids, or, instead of using our words, the kids will lash out. And so a lot of times in these play situations where they would be with like other kids, other brown kids and other white kids, they would lash out. And so that would automatically disqualify them from the program, because, the thought would be, you can't come to the school if you can't control yourself. And so a lot of times that shows in turn that, like, I would see that and I would say to myself, like, wow, this kid, would have been a great fit here. However, because the kid didn't have self-control, or wasn't taught that self-control, and also sometimes in that same line as brown kids, they wouldn't have the same exposure as the other kids would have, like the white kids would have. And when I say that, I mean like the theaters, the museums, and like, going to the Met. And so there's all these activities that as brown parents wouldn't have access to, or they wouldn't even have the time or the extra funds to, put their kids in these programs or to take them to these different locations.
So do you blame the parents, or do you blame society?
I blame society, because also you have to keep in mind there's also a huge wealth gap between black people and white people when you look at the wealth gap. But that also goes back to redlining in education, which is like a whole other,
I know. Well, you know what it is? I live in a school district where I live in Long Island, and my school district, the taxes are high. Where I am. I mean, like double digits high, not even like single digits, it's double digits high. But let me tell you, you are right. Like, because you're putting so much into school taxes, you are the parents are so involved, because I'm like, wait a minute, if I'm going to spend this money, I'm going to make sure I'm going to be there. The teachers know they know my name, they know my kids. You know, if there's a problem, the teacher just texts me. They know we show up.
Yes.
We show up because we will hold the school accountable because of the money that we're spending. We're like, hold up, you're going to make sure A, B, C, D, everything happens, or you're not going to have the taxes go up next year because, you know, the school budget, because we have to vote on the school budget every year. So parents could vote yes and parents could vote no. So that's how we kind of hold the schools accountable. Like, if we don't feel like you're doing a good job, then we don't think that you should get an increase. And some schools actually go downwards.
That's true, because where I went to high school, it was one of the top 10 schools in the country. And so how that played in was just the education, just how they taught the kids to take tests. We were taught to take standardized tests. So they taught us early on, like we started SAT prep in 6th grade and then it kept going. So there's kids that got perfect scores. However, how it impacted minority kids was, you know, I feel like there was a lot of favoritism towards, a lot of times as a Black child, if you didn't know what scholarships were available to you, the school counselor wouldn't tell you. So it's a lot of times, like in my parents being foreign, they didn't know this stuff. And so a lot of times this knowledge, there's 7 of us, so this knowledge didn't come till later on down the line, where we were telling our siblings like, oh, you know, look into this scholarship, do this, or you have to really press or keep talking to the counselor, because a lot of times our school counselor wouldn't give brown kids that opportunity to go to these like Ivy League schools. That would be given to they wouldn't even give it to us, even though we would be qualified for it, or we would have the high GPAs. So,
really? So is it because the school was majority Black and brown, or
no, my school was predominantly white. I grew up in a white Jewish community where there was very few, you know, Black people.
Where'd you grow up at?
I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, but I grew up in a suburb of Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay, just to give a frame of reference, because I don't want people to think you're from New York when you went to school. So when you went to school in Ohio, you felt that you didn't get the information from your guidance counselor versus the other kids. So how did you know that you wasn't getting the information? Did the other kids tell you, and you were like, well, she didn't tell me that? Or just with experience, as you got older, you realized that you weren't told this information?
Some of it was my older sister. She had an experience where she actually, the Ivy League school reached out to her and say, hey, we've been trying to contact you. We sent information to your school counselor, like what happened? And so that was where we realized that he wasn't giving us information, or he wasn't giving us the same opportunities that he was giving to the white kids. Because also the area I grew up was like, it was segregated. It was segregated in terms of like all the wealthy people lived on the hills, and like all the brown people lived, you know, by the train tracks and stuff like that. And they didn't live on the hills. And so my family, we lived on the hill, and we lived on one of the hills where I grew up. And so even growing up in that environment, like even just going into my community where I grew up, like the police would follow you if they didn't recognize you from, you know, from this particular suburb. They would follow you, pull you over if they didn't know who you were.
Really?
It still happens to this day.
It happens because a while ago, my nephew had a party at my house when he was like in high school. And there was so many kids that came to this party. I was like, oh my God. So what happened was, we did tell the neighbors, but for some reason, the police came, you know, to the house, right? So when I opened the door, he said, can I please speak to the owner? I was like,
right here.
I was like, I'm an owner. He was like, well, how do I know you live in this area? Because we live in a pretty nice area. And he goes, you know what? Go get your license.
Wow.
I said, what? Wow. He said, go get your license.
Wow.
And He was trying to come in the house, and I was like, no, you think I was like, you don't have a warrant to walk into my house. You just sit right out there, and I will go get your license. And that's what happened. I was just like, wow, we literally had to go get our license to prove that we were actually the owners of the house. And then when he looked at it and he looked at us, he was like, oh, okay. He didn't even apologize.
Well,
he didn't even apologize or anything like that. But it goes to show you that it's so weird. Like, I don't understand, like, why in this day and age that all this kind of still goes on. Because, you know, I know there's Black Americans, but I hate how every race, you know, I hate how they lump everyone
together
and together and make a judgment on like the whole, sometimes on the whole race, until they get to meet you and get to know you, and then they go, oh, you're different, and I'm like, what does that mean exactly?
You're not what I expected, or like you sound like us. You don't look like us, but you sound like us. Does that make sense?
Yes, they used to always say, what do your parents do? I was like, what does that mean? What does my parents do? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, because they can't figure out why do you sound the way you do, or why do you, why does it feel like you don't look like them, but why does it feel like you feel like them? And so
you know what I tell them? It's because of the education that I got.
Yes. And that's a lot of times, and I feel like a lot of times this education that we got makes it, like, I feel like we are able to go between both worlds in terms of within the Black community and then within, their community, the other side. So a lot of times I want to say we are well spoken because we are educated and we've had the privilege and been made to be able to assimilate and to speak like them. Because growing up, I remember there was a time when my mom would say things like, oh, when you go to interviews, don't have braids, make sure you have a relaxer, or,
make sure you have your hair straightened, or it would be like, because you didn't want to be as, you wanted to be as so crazy, as American as possible, instead of being seen as a Black American.
Yes.
Do you understand what I mean when I say that?
And a lot of times as Black women, we're seen as, what did they call us? Angry. And so in the workplace, a lot of times you even see parodies or things on TV where how we are portrayed as being angry. And a lot of times it's like, that's not the case at all. A lot of times
we're just passionate. We're passionate like everyone else.
That and also society. I almost want to say sometimes they don't really take us seriously. And so a lot of times, even within the corporate world, as women, we have to go that much. We have to be that much better. We have to be that much more vocal, or some people may say more masculine energy with a touch of feminine energy, where, we still have to, we have to, you can't just say, I know something. You have to have the facts. Like, you have to be able to point it out in a book and say, this is where I got it from. This is, it's almost like you have to give annotations of where
you have to cite it. You have to cite where you got it from, because it's no way that it's true.
Why would you know that?
Unless you prove it's true. My parents used to tell me me and my siblings and our family has to work twice as hard. We literally worked in school. We literally worked twice as hard because we had to be that more educated. Heads and shoulders. I feel for us to even walk in a room, because it's so sad that people judge a book by its cover sometimes. And when you walk in, even my name, like my parents was like, oh, we made sure we gave you like clean names, so it's weird now, because now people could kind of Google you and see how you look before they even call you to interview you. They could do research, but back then they couldn't tell, how you looked until you came to the interview. So it was so weird. Like, I would walk in, I would talk to them. Oh yeah, come here. And then I would walk in. They were like,
Indeed. Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, it's me. And they were like, really?
Huh.
And then I start talking. They're like, oh, it is her. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's just, it's the crazy thing is like now I'm trying to get my kids to understand why education is so important, because right now I can't stand the social media thing. I know that I guess they need it, but I feel like it's a distraction for all the kids, especially in education. And I feel like it's affecting test scores, it's affecting reading levels. Kids need to be stimulated because that's what the social media does. It stimulates you.
It also affects how they write, because they write shorthanded, and so a lot of times from social media they're not writing full thoughts, full sentences, paragraph correct, the correct grammar.
You know what's insane about this? My kids are in 4th grade and they already have a typing class. My kids actually know how to type.
That's good. I remember
in 4th grade.
That's good. I'm glad they didn't teach us till high school, but
you know what it is though, because now they're not really writing anymore. They learned the cursive for like a couple of weeks.
Do they still learn cursive? Because I feel like they don't learn cursive anymore. Because I know when I worked in the school system, a lot of kids didn't I noticed a lot of kids didn't know how to write cursive as well as how they teach reading was different from how they taught it when we were kids. Like they teach sight words versus phonics, sounding words out. They memorize the words.
Well, you know what? Because the kids are texting a lot now,
mm-hmm.
That's why they decided to start doing typing early, because they're used to using the hands versus
mm-hmm.
actually, I mean, they do write, because my kids are writing, paragraphs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they introduced the typing early because of the fact that kids are using their computers now. Like my kids actually had Chromebooks. That's another advantage. My kids have their own Chromebooks that they bring home. So in I think like 1st grade. Wow. So they were doing things in 1st grade with their Chromebook. So yes, they were learning how to write, but they also wanted to introduce typing to them, because they were now on the Chromebook. So they figured the older they were getting, the more they were going to write, paragraphs, so they would know how to type versus going how you use 2 fingers and stuff like that. But they did learn cursive, but it was only for a short period, just to introduce them to what it is. So when they see it, they know how to read it if it does come up. But that's what I mean. You are right when it comes to the red lining of education, because like where I live, I personally feel that taxes keep certain people out of the area.
Yes.
And, the higher the taxes, but you know what it is too? I think they pay teachers more too. Because I didn't know this. I thought all teachers got the same salaries based on different grades, meaning that if you were here for 1 year versus here for 20 years, I thought it was more like a grade thing, and everyone was, whatever year you were in, the whole New York State got the same salary. I just found out when my kids went to kindergarten that it wasn't like that. Like where we live in Long Island, depending on where you live, different teachers make different salaries, teaching the same thing. And I really think that they should just be a universal. This is what I feel about teachers. I think teachers are the foundation of this country. I cannot believe the life of me how, like in the state of Florida, I think they make $40,000, $50,000. Like I'm like, are you serious? Explain it to me. Why are teachers not paid as much as doctors when they teach the children?
These are the kids that become your doctors.
You said what?
These are the kids that become your doctor. That will become your doctors.
Doctor, President of the United States, Vice President of the United States, a congressperson. Just everything that we do in this country starts with the teachers. The teachers actually are the ones. I'm not saying the parents don't help education. Of course they do, but your teachers are with your kids as much time as you are with your kids as a parent. And for the life of me, I do not understand why teachers are not seen as get paid as lawyers, get paid as.
Why is there no value in that profession? Why do people not see a value in that profession?
Okay, so why don't you see I think the kids are not being educated as they should be, because it has to do with the fact that I want you to pay me what I'm worth. So if people are motivated by money, you're going to pay me a certain amount of money, I feel like I'm going to work harder because I feel like you value me. If you're
That
going to
is
pay me
true.
like $40,000 a year, I'm not going to say I'm not going to be the best teacher in the world, but my effort is not going to be the same
It's
as
not
if I
going to
get a.
be 100%, yeah, because the money doesn't equal your time. But also keep in mind with teaching, I feel like my thought is you really have to have a passion for it, because from my experience with teaching, um, kids are trying. They will test you, and I mean, I hate to say it, I had a supervisor or my program director say kids, they sense your emotions. So if you're scared or nervous, they can sense that. And so,
Really?
I mean, my first teaching experience,
Yeah.
my first day, the kids made fun of me and they threw candy at me, and they were high school kids. Yeah. And
High
so,
school's tough. High school's tough.
and that was my first teaching experience. And I was like, and so I was like, and then my program director came to like my next class and was like, they can sense if you're not confident or if you're nervous and scared, they can see that or they can sense that. And so as I got to know my students, my kids, like, they respected me. And
But
it was no longer like,
shouldn't the respect come from home?
of course, but
I can't even imagine. I'm not gonna say my kids are perfect, but I can't even imagine my kid disrespecting an adult like that. Whether you're scared or not, you're a child, you're an adult. Hopefully I'm raising my kids well enough to know to respect an adult where they're not throwing candy at an adult. I mean,
you would think that ideally, you would think kids wouldn't do that, but part of it was like I wondered, is it because I looked close to their age, and so they're like, we can't really tell, or she doesn't feel like a teacher, so we're gonna see, we're gonna test her, or see, so it was one of those situations where, yeah, they tested me, but then like as the year went on, like it does start at home, where a lot of times, my students were inappropriate. I'm not going to say they weren't, but they were, the things that they always say. And I would always be like, where's your mother? Or you speak like that to people, or that's how you speak to adults, or is it just how you speak to me? Because if you're just speaking to me as a woman or like that, that's still very disrespectful. So it's a lot of times where I had to, constantly talk to them like, no, that's not how you speak to people. When you go into the world, you speak professionally, you speak how you treat people, how you want to be treated. So if you're not going to have respect for yourself, or you're going to speak to people like that, people will treat you like that.
I mean, I tell my kids, you get more bees with honey than with vinegar, and put yourself in the other person's shoes. Like, I'm constantly teaching my kids how to treat human beings, because I don't know, I think there's a lack of empathy going on right now.
It's huge. And you see that, and you notice that a lot in this world that we live in, that's something that's lacking, is that there is no empathy, or that, and people don't listen, or they're not open to hearing, what your fellow man is saying to you. And a lot of times the things that people say to you, you almost have to be able to, by listening, you almost have to read in between the lines and be able to sense like, oh, okay, so, they're saying more. The words coming out of their mouth isn't exactly what they're saying. They're saying there's more being said.
Okay. Sorry, Kemi. I just got to tell my Optimum viewers, thank you so much for joining. I'm proud of you, sis. And we will be right back to speak more about the state of education in our country. Okay, so we're back. All right, so let's like dive into the state of education. So why do you think certain kids, besides the redlining and and everything like that, why do you think that you know, some kids do better in school or not. Some kids love going to school, don't like going to school. Some kids want to learn, some kids don't want to learn. I mean, are we going to blame society? Are we going to be blame parents? Or we can't really blame anything. I mean, explain it to me, because we got to take some responsibility for what we personally do also based on our circumstances.
I also think I think it's parents. I think it's parents and it's school, the environments that are created, because I do know a lot of, sometimes I do sometimes speak at schools, and I have spoken at schools where I notice the teachers that create safe spaces, or like a safe space or an environment where kids feel like they can be themselves, the kids have a higher chance of coming to school. And so from my experience, I think it also starts with parents. Like if your parents aren't around and they're not pushing you, you're not going to go to school. And a lot of times from my experience when I was a youth advocate counselor, part of my job was to go to these kids' homes and see what was going on, or like, why weren't they coming to school? And also was to talk to their parents. And a lot of times when we would have like parents' nights, the parents would be working, so they couldn't come and like talk to the teachers and stuff and see what's going on with the kids, or there were very few parents that would come. And it was always interesting, the parents that came, because then you would see their kids, and their kids would all be sitting there like, oh, dang, my mom's is here, or my pops is here. Like, oh, man, Miss Kemi, can you say something nice? No, you didn't come to school. I'm going to be honest and tell your parents that you didn't come to school, and that when I went to see your house, when I went to visit, you were sitting outside, or you were doing X, Y, and Z. You weren't doing what you were supposed to do. So I'm going to be honest with your parents, and I'm going to be honest with you. And so a lot of times I felt like when I had that role was to push the kids, and a lot of times was to see what was missing at home and provide that to the kids, in terms of like, sometimes they needed that person to be like, no, you're coming to school. If you don't come to school in 2 days, I'm coming to your house and I'm going to bring you to school, and I'm going to call you every day to make sure you get up. So sometimes they needed, that person to be that parent, which is something a lot of the kids that they didn't have. And so I had kids where they would be like, my goal is to, get a GED, get a car, and have a baby. And I'd be like, oh,
that's
wow.
a goal?
Their goal was to stay alive. And so for them, a lot of times, sometimes school would be that safe space where them coming to school was, it was safe, where they could just chill, relax, have a free meal, and just like, get something from it outside of things that they couldn't get from home, or they felt like they created an environment where their school friends were their family.
So do you think education is a cycle then? Do you think, I know there's an income gap. I know men get paid more than women. And as you go from the man to the woman, and then it starts trickling down. You know what I mean? So do you think it's because education is a cycle? Like if I'm not educated enough to get this great job, and then I have to get a lower paying job, then therefore it becomes a cycle that the kids look at it and go, well, this is going to be my life too, so I don't have to work as hard, because these are my expectations. I might not live tomorrow because the streets are crime infested. I don't live in a great neighborhood. Do you think that the reason I'm asking you this is because we had this conversation too. My parents were immigrants, and they moved here, and they didn't know English. Well, they had to know English because they came here legally. So they did know English. They were citizens when they came here. And my parents had to work 2 or 3 jobs. Mm-hmm. And then remember what we said, then what we all did is we all kind of lived together. That's why I'm so close to my family. I'm so close to my cousins, because we saw the grind in the household of all of our parents and relatives. So we could live together, and then they would save their money, and one by one, each family was able to afford their home because they had to save their money. So we saw that work ethic, and we just kind of duplicated, tripled it. There's a thing in our culture called susu, where we still kind of do something like that. So what susu is basically we're doing what our parents did. Like each month we all put in a certain amount into a pot, and it goes around and it collects. And then as you're putting the money in a pot, the person that's due to get that whole money gets that whole money. So that was how my family were able to save to get a down payment for their house, because sometimes you have to be like held accountable, right? So I'm wondering, the question I'm asking you is it I don't know, is it out, our parents were born outside of America.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying anything about it like, oh, Caribbeans or, Africans from Africa are better. I'm just saying, remember the conversation we had, that the way that we got out of our country was education.
Yes.
So our parents would push education on us because
They're saying,
education was power. Power. You're educated, you will move up. That's when they started saying doctor, lawyer, engineer, blah 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 blah, because you have to be educated to even go that high up in the echelon, right? So do you think that it's how each person values education as to why it becomes, some people get better education than others?
I think so. I think also exposure as well, because I also had a friend who once told me, when I told her she doesn't have to be an entrepreneur, she doesn't have to have a college degree, and she was floored. And so a lot of times I think it goes back to exposure, and it does go back to education, where if no one's pushing you or telling you this stuff or teaching you this stuff, why would you know this stuff? If no one says or introduces you to these new concepts or facts, why would you know it unless there's some people that they may have that thirst to want to question society and be like, what does this mean? You know what? Let me look this up. And then especially this day and age where we have Google, not everyone, even there's people that still don't know what Google is or how to use it, or that, that you can look things up or you can find things via Google.
Well, I'm not going to say most people, because a lot of kids don't have phones, but you have a phone now. So education is in the palm of your hands. And even if you're not getting it at school, there's so many things that you can learn online. Like, you just type something and say, even like I'm on Khan Academy for my kids. So sometimes when they come home, Khan Academy is a nonprofit educational system that actually teaches your kids all different types of subjects. I don't know. Do you know Khan?
I've never
Khan
heard
Academy?
No, but this is my first time hearing about it, which is interesting.
Oh my God. So basically, Khan Academy, for everyone out there, it's free because it's a nonprofit where if your kids don't understand a lesson, you go into Khan Academy, and there's a professor that will actually teach your kid the lesson.
Oh, wow.
And
how do you spell it? K-A-H-N or K?
Yeah, it's Khan Academy.
Oh,
so
wow.
I call this the tutoring for my children, because I don't know Common Core. I wasn't raised on Common Core standards.
I don't know what that is. Yeah.
Oh, you don't know Common Core? I know. I don't know it either. I learned straight math, like 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah. Now they have that. Yeah, it's weird.
So the way Common Core works now is they want you to do critical thinking all the time. So they don't want you to straight kind of memorize something. They want to know how you actually got to that. So they teach the kids how they actually got to that. So it's 4 + 4 = 8. How we were taught to memorize.
Yeah.
They want these kids to do critical thinking now and not memorize.
Oh, wow.
Also, the math is more wording, problem solving. So your kids have to know how to read. So my kids have to read 30 minutes every single day. Like 30, there's like I have a bookmark that has a timer. And as soon as they come home, because you know what it is, the kids are anticipating when the 30 minutes ends.
Yeah, so you're like, there's a timer, so it's a very visual, where it's like you can see.
Visual, yes, there's a visual thing, and the thing with the reading is education. If you know how to read, you can be educated at anything that you do.
That's very true.
So in my district, I don't know how it works in other districts. It is a requirement. It is part of the homework. In addition to all the homework they have to read 30 minutes a day. So besides the reading, Khan Academy is a tutoring for our children from K to 12.
Wow.
And they also have college courses too. That
Wow.
if your kids come home and you don't understand something, you go to Khan Academy. You just have to log in, password, and any topic, earth
Wow.
science. There's a professor teaching it to your kids.
Wow. That's
And
impressive.
I'm so surprised that, you know what, you don't have kids yet. That's
I
probably
know.
why I don't know. But you will have kids soon. But if anyone out there is, that's why I feel like you are right. If you don't know the information, how would you know? Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How would you know, right? If you don't know the information. But what I want to tell parents out there, if you can't afford a tutor, because that's how I stumbled to it. You know how I stumbled on things? I talk to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. Ask my kids. I talk to everybody. I don't care how you look. I don't judge a book by a cover. You're standing next to me, I'm gonna talk to you. I don't care. My kids be like, "Stop, mom," and I'm like, "No," because I'm gonna learn from this person. That's why I teach my kids. Like, the more people I talk to, no matter their race, their creed, their color, their gender, whatever, it's all about me learning something new that I didn't know before. That's why I have my opinions on certain topics, but
Mm-hmm.
I give people the space for them to talk about why they feel the way that they feel, because I feel like sometimes I'll pick up on something that I didn't know before without judging them.
And that makes
right?
sense. Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I found out about ABC Con. I was sitting at like Jiffy Lube,
Mm-hmm.
and someone said to me, "Oh," I was talking about tutoring. I was like, "Oh my God, I can't afford this. Like, I have 2 kids, $60 each kid a week for an hour. That's crazy." And then the mom goes, "Oh, you have to go to ABC Con." I was like, "What is that?"
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to tell my friends with kids, like, have you heard of ABC Con? You need to look into it.
No, it's called Khan Academy. It's not called ABC Con. It's called Khan Academy. Yeah, it's called Khan Academy, KHAN Academy. And just for all the parents out there who can't afford tutors, you don't even have to listen to it. You would just go into the topic, and the professor just talks, and basically on a chalkboard, and shows them. Because my kids were having a hard time with fractions, and converting to decimals. They're like in that 4th grade thing where, and it's core too. So I don't know core, so it helps. So okay. So how do you feel that education could be better in America before we start wrapping things up?
Seeing how the world doesn't take our education system seriously. Like, if you ever look at the numbers and you see how behind we are, I feel like our schools need more structure and more routine. And I feel like our schools are very easy in terms of compared to other countries. Like, they're so much more advanced. And I remember in high school, and any of my family members that would do parts of high school in Nigeria, and then they would come to America to like finish up their senior year, they'd be like, "Oh my God, like this was pre-K, or this was like, 8th grade. Like, this is so easy." And so I think our school systems, if the kids were more challenged, that, and I also feel like we're so, this is like another topic in itself, but we always medicate our kids. And so when you look at like ADD, HD in other countries, it's almost as if they don't believe in it, and they're not giving their kids these medications. And so a lot of times there's, a lot of times I also feel like kids are bored. And so I feel like a lot of these American schools, because the curriculum is always the same, like a lot of times there's teachers aren't that innovative. And I sometimes feel like they're not given the opportunity to be innovative, or they're bored themselves.
So the kids get antsy. The kids are moving around a lot, because
when you're not allowed to move, or you got to sit still. And sometimes kids just need to be kids and play. But you can
around
games that educate them, especially when they're young, because that's the core, like elementary school. Like, when you create games or, fun, even works for adults. Like, when you create, games for them, or things that help them to memorize things and learn things, like, it makes it more interesting, and they're more challenged.
Yeah, my kids used to move around a lot, like just get antsy and stuff. So I think they created like fidgets.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? To like, because it wasn't, they just had to move a lot. So they put something in their hand where instead of them moving, the
Right.
anxiety or the anxiousness just, they kept, and I think that I think that you are right. It's so funny. So many kids are diagnosed with ADHD now.
And I remember,
And
yeah, there was a study where kids with ADHD, I think they were like kindergartners or pre-K, what they would do is have them sit on the yoga balls and chew gum. And so like they would be multitasking, trying to balance on the balls and like, chewing gum. And so that would keep them from talking, and they would be doing all this stuff with their bodies where they'd be moving around and trying to focus, but they would be able to focus on the work in front of them. And so it's like you said with the fidgets, like they're sitting there, they're focused because they have something, they're doing more than one task at a time.
And I think with social media, I think that the kids multitask. I feel that they're playing a game, they're flipping through, they're just, it's just what I think. My personal thing about education is I feel like every kid should wear a uniform.
I agree.
Only because I hate the competition with the you wearing Yeezys versus you're wearing like Walmart shoes. I think it's like a distraction. I think it'd be cheaper for parents just to wear a uniform. I mean, I know it's about social expression, and I want to wear what I want to wear, but I feel like you go to school to learn and not for a fashion show.
And I agree.
Yeah, so the uniform thing works. I also feel like what with better education is just the teachers getting paid more, the parents being more involved. Yes, I understand that you have 2 or 3 jobs, but make it easier for parents where now, because of COVID, that they could FaceTime going into, because we did it for 2 years where we weren't allowed into the school buildings, and we were doing meetings and all this through FaceTime. So sometimes parents can't physically be there, but they should give an option to the parent where you can visually talk to the teacher and be involved without physically being there.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the more the parent is involved, I feel like the better outcome your kids will have in school. I mean, what do you think about that?
I agree because also the parent has more of a stake in it. And then when you're saying like with FaceTiming, there's more of a stake. And also I feel like if teachers were paid more, they have a bigger stake or even just a reason to be there.
Yeah.
Where they feel like, okay, let me make my money. But I also feel like there has to be a love. Like they have to like what they're doing. Because I've met plenty of teachers who've done it just to get a check, but with doing it just to get a check, there is no passion in what you're teaching. You don't come up with innovative ways to get people to learn, to get the kids to learn the material.
And last question, how do you feel about AI?
I think we should embrace it. And I feel like a lot of people are scared, but AI is like I feel like it's the wild, wild west. There's no rules. So with these kids that are on social media and stuff like that, like there's a lot you can do and create with AIs. And so I'm like, go for it. Like, I feel like
do you think it's going to kill it? You think it's going to kill?
No, I don't think it'll kill education. But I am interested to see how people use AI in the education arena. Because I've seen so far people are like, oh, you can have an AI write your paper, but with it writing your paper, you have to do it in such a way where, your teacher can actually just copy paste your paper, drop it in AI, and then boom, there's your paper. You've plagiarized it, or it's not your work. So a lot of times it's like you still have to do.
You still gotta put your own creativity in it. You still gotta do. You can't plagiarize. You still gotta put your words into it to make it your own. Well, thank you so much, Kemi, for coming on the show. I'm proud of you, sis, to talk about the state of education. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm proud of you, sis, and see you next week. Have a great week. Bye.
Bye.